A lot of people are trying to skip the line to get on the big shows, and you're missing so many of the benefits. What is your filtering process before you go on a show? Are you saying it must have X level of audience? There must be an opportunity for me to sell my book, or whatever. If the filter is, I want to add as much value as possible, essentially that's all the shows. Sit down on a scale of 0 to 10. How important are each of those for you? And is there anything we could do to open up the floodgates a little more? If you're trying to get on more shows, I think it is probably valuable to open up and remove some of the filters. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. It was episode number 145, more common questions I get asked the most. Today, for episode number 141, 3 big reasons you're not guesting on more shows. So last week was 5 questions. This week is 3 reasons. I like numbers for some reason. I don't know why. I guess it makes it a little bit easier. So as of today, and again, this isn't a flex. I just want you to know that I'm not talking out of my butt. I think as of today, I've been on 989 other podcasts, been on a lot of shows. Many of you listening, shout out to you. I appreciate you for having me. I'm sure it was a wonderful experience. But I think a lot of people are missing out on a ton of opportunity when it comes to guesting on other podcasts. And yeah, some of it might be because you don't have credibility yet. Some of it might be because you're just copy pasting a message to people on Podmatch or Matchmaker. Some of it might be because you're not aligned with their message. All those are real things. But today I want to talk about the 3 reasons within our control, I guess. And there'll be something under the iceberg for those 3 reasons. So I guess it's really one big reason broken up into 3. The one big reason that most people are not getting on more shows is because they don't know why they are getting on shows in the first place. I'm sure you have had someone say, or you've read it online, or you've heard it on a podcast, you've heard it on this podcast, one of the best ways to grow your show, one of the best ways to meet new people, one of the best ways to do blank, blank, and blank is to get on other podcasts. That is definitely true. It's a great resource, but it's not great for just the reason people say. So the 3 big reasons are, 1, you don't care about getting better. And again, I'll go through all these. 2, you don't care that much about impact. 3, you only care about making money. Now, those are very blanket statements, so please let me get into them before you click away and say, Kev, you suck. So 1, you don't care about mastery. What do I mean by that? Out of the almost 1,000 podcasts I've been on as a guest, 25% of them are no longer in production. I don't know, maybe 10% of them, I was one of their first 20 episodes, hypothetically. 50% of them were never going to work with us because they either weren't our ideal client, they didn't have the money, they already had a team, they were so new or they weren't looking for help. So if you think about those numbers, I have to understand why I'm going on the podcast. If I only went on podcasts that I thought I could make money from, there's no way I would ever have gone on as many podcasts as I have. That's not the number one reason for me. If I only went on podcasts that I thought had large audiences so I could impact more people, 80% of the podcasts I've been on are gone right there. So all those shows go away. But every single show I've gone on has given me an opportunity to practice the craft, mastery, to get better. So one thought is, if you're not thinking of how can me going on this podcast improve my skills as a host, as a guest, as a speaker, as a communicator, as a teacher, as a facilitator, whatever, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. Because I know most people say, well, how big is the audience and what is the likelihood that I can sell something? I don't think that should ever be the first thing. Ever, ever, ever. I don't think that should ever be the first thing. Now, if you're 25 years into the journey and you're getting paid $100,000 to speak, maybe it's different. Maybe you're not thinking of, well, this is a really good opportunity for me to get better, because you might have paid opportunities to get better. But for most of us, that's a long ways away, or it might unfortunately never happen. So the first reason that I think a lot of people aren't getting on more shows is they're not connecting to this podcast, regardless of the size and or opportunity to make money from it, is a really good opportunity for me to get better as a speaker. If you can put a podcast into that bucket, so think of it this way. There's a mastery bucket, there's an impact bucket, and there's a profitability bucket. If you can put a podcast into one of those buckets, it's probably worth doing. Now, is it 2 times worth doing if you can get all 3 buckets filled? Sure. Is it more valuable if you have an opportunity to make money from it? Sure. But you're missing out on a lot of opportunity if that's the only thought. And there's a reason it goes mastery, get really good, improve, impact, when you are a better communicator, you have a higher probability of adding value through impact, and then profitability. If you get the first 2 down, then the third one can happen eventually. But a lot of people, and I've seen this with clients, who will come to me and say, hey, can you help me get on shows? Yes. Okay, cool. My only requirement is the shows I get on must be bigger than mine, and it must be an opportunity for me to make money. Most likely, can we do that? Yes. It's going to be a pain in the butt, and you're literally excluding 80% of the shows that you have the opportunity to get on. It's going to be hard for any of us to get on shows that are bigger than ours, especially if the podcast is like your claim to fame. So think of it that way. If your audience, let's say you have 1,000 listens per month, the shows that you're reaching out to that say yes to you are probably going to have a similar amount, if not less, because that's just kind of the way it works, right? It's just the energy of it. It's just the expectations of it. It's just kind of the way it works. But it doesn't mean that's not worth the amount of impact that you're going to get. Because if that wasn't worth it, then you would stop doing your own episodes. This is exposure and introduction to a completely new audience. So I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, so the first one is mastery. There's something about being a guest on another podcast that's different than what I'm doing right now. This is different than you being on the other side asking me questions. Yes, when I do this, I have to think on my feet because I don't have a script. I don't have anything written down. That's the way I like to do it. But on a podcast as a guest, you have to do all of your thinking on your feet. And you're going to get questions that maybe you've never been asked before, and you can practice your pauses, you can practice your storytelling. I believe, and this is going to be a bold statement, but I've said this to many clients, I believe one of the best things you can do as a podcast host is to guest on as many other shows as possible. It's going to make you a better host. You're going to see things that other people are doing that work or don't work, and it's going to give you the ability to be able to speak on your feet. That is a very long-term perspective, right? Out of those 1,000 shows, I've gotten a lot better, but I can't necessarily connect, when I was on this podcast, I noticed I did this way better. Not really. I think it's just an accumulation of those shows. So one of the big reasons you might not be getting on more shows is because you're not valuing how much the reps add up. And by not thinking that, you might be saying no to shows that you could easily get on that might not necessarily have a huge audience, and they might not necessarily have any opportunity for you to make money. So that's one. The second one is impact. So impact to me means being in front of some level of audience. I don't expect shows that have millions of listeners and giant audiences to want to have me on yet. I understand. I'm not that big. I'm not that well known. The upside isn't there yet. But if I can get on a show that has 50 listens per episode, that's 50 people per episode. I mean, that's an opportunity to get introduction to 50 new people. And there's 2 thoughts around that. When it comes to impact, there's breadth and there's depth. So breadth is the amount of people you can impact. Depth is the degree to which you can impact them. So in my mind, it's kind of twofold. Okay, I come on your podcast. The episode that you and I are going to do together is most likely going to get like 50 listens. Awesome. That is breadth. That's 50 people that hopefully we can add some value to. But the depth for me is the person sitting right in front of me. It's the host. There can be depth there. And you never know what kind of relationship you can build with a podcast host that might come to fruition later on. I've been invited to speak at masterminds. I've been invited to speak at virtual events and summits, all of that stuff from podcast hosts where I went on their show. And they don't have massive audiences, but it was a connection that I was able to make with them based on the fact that I was pouring directly into them. I think it's next week. Next week or 2 weeks from today, I'm speaking at a summit from somebody who was once a podcast listener, eventually became a client, right? Now, obviously that's a little bit different, but it all started on a podcast. So that's the second thing is a lot of people are trying to skip the line to get on the big shows, and you're missing so many of the benefits. I've been on some pretty big shows, which has been awesome. And I've been on some pretty big YouTube channels and stuff like that, which is awesome. But the truth is, I probably wouldn't have been ready to do those and add value if I hadn't done a lot of the smaller shows. That's part one. Part two, impact multiplies. So rather than, okay, I want to get on a show that has 1,000 listens per episode. Okay. You could also go do 20 shows that has 50 listens per episode. And it's going to give you different results. I'm not saying better, I'm not saying worse, but it's going to give you different results. And you're going to get way better because of mastery. One workout versus 50 workouts. You can go to the gym, and I understand it's not this straightforward, but you can go to the gym for 8 hours, or you can do 8 one-hour workouts. I'm telling you, the 8 one-hour workouts is going to be better. I know it's not apples to apples. But that's the second thing, is we're not as focused on impact as we could be. And then the third thing is we're more focused on profitability than anything else. So if the order of these is switched around, I'm willing to bet you won't go on that many shows. If you're thinking, well, I have to make money, if I get to impact people, okay, that's cool. And yeah, I mean, I might get a little bit better by going on. You're probably not going to put in the reps. And I'm not making that wrong. If that's the way you want to approach it, I'm all for it. Well, I'm not all for it. That's not my style, but I'm all for that for you. If that's the way you want to do it, who am I to tell you not to do it that way? I just think you're missing out on a ton of opportunities. I do. Because I've gone on podcasts before where it was like, okay, I can't imagine this person will listen to our podcast. I can't imagine this is the type of person that would ever work with us. But it's a really good opportunity for me to practice my craft. Then come to find out, maybe they have a bigger social media following than I thought. And then who knows, 2 years later, they reach out and say, hey, remember how we talked about blank? Is that something you're still doing? I'd love to learn more about it. Cool. Interesting.
Hey, Kevin. Kim here. Just wanted to send you a video to say thank you so much for your help on creating the Peaceful Productivity podcast. You know, I couldn't have done it without you. I knew you'd be lots of great help with the technical aspects of getting the podcast going, but you went well above and beyond that. You helped me with the strategy and you gave me all kinds of really great support. You know, I think the key to success in business is a great attitude, and you have that in spades. You really walk the walk. So thanks again. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Now, again, I know I'm a podcast coach, so it's a little bit different. But I have business clients who are business coaches who do that, and they get reached out to eventually, or they start conversations with people and they end up working together. So it doesn't just work with me. It's worked with a lot of people across a lot of different industries. But if you have these in the wrong order, you're going to be missing out on a lot of opportunities. Even like if we think of it from a job application perspective. If you're thinking, oh, this job it has a lot of opportunity for me to grow, and I feel like the culture is really good, and I feel like it's close by to where I live. If you have to go to the place, I feel like the hours are good and the leadership is great, cool, and it pays well. You have to sit down and figure out, well, what's most important to you? Would you rather make $10,000 more and have a crappy culture? Would you rather make $1,000 a year less but have a different commute. It's all about the core values and the core beliefs. This is the same thing. I have a core belief that going on a podcast, not going on a podcast because there's not an opportunity to make money, just doesn't make sense. Not going on a podcast because the audience isn't of X size doesn't make sense. Those are my beliefs. Now, it's a very long-term perspective. That's one thing. If I want to brand myself as something, if I want to market myself as something, if I want to build a reputation, one of the best ways to do that is just to get out there. So if I go on YouTube and I search my name, there's a lot of podcast episodes. A ton. And in most of those, it doesn't mention me at all being a podcast coach. It talks about Next Level University, holistic self-improvement, because that's the big mission. That's really what we're trying to focus on. This show is obviously different. But none of those would have happened if I didn't appreciate the fact that this is an opportunity for me to get better. I'm not saying you have to adopt this philosophy. I'm not saying you should go on shows that are smaller than yours. I'm not saying that necessarily. I just think there's a lot of value in it. And if you're only thinking, well, the show has to be bigger than mine, cool, that is going to negate a lot of shows. It has to be an opportunity for me to make money. That's also going to negate a lot of shows. And you're also not factoring in how much that show can change. That's a whole nother conversation. Is, well, if that show sticks around for a couple of years, you don't really know what they're going to do. Oh, you're the first episode on a show that now gets 1,000 listens per episode? Who knows how many people are going to go back and see your episode? So that's another piece of it, right? But that's long-term impact. So that kind of falls under the impact bucket. So my suggestion, I guess my tactical takeaway, if you wanna run with it, is sit down and currently, what is your filtering process before you go on a show? Are you saying it must have X level of audience? There must be an opportunity for me to sell my book, or whatever. If that's your current system, it might be worth opening up more. Because there's a lot of shows that I've been on that aren't super big that create nice content. And they tag me in that content on social media, and then I share it. And that helps build credibility. Oh, Kevin was on another podcast? Cool. What is this show about? Especially if you're somebody who doesn't produce a ton of content, that's a really easy way to get some high-quality content made. So maybe the system is, okay, this is what I do. I'll share with you what I do, and maybe there's something you could take from it. So Laura on our team sends messages to shows that are aligned based on my message, and if we think their show is positive and it's good for the world, we send a message. Laura sends a message to them. Goes through the process of booking. If it's aligned, awesome. Then it shows up in my calendar. When I'm doing my research for the day, so in the morning I'll look and see what my calls are for the day, I'll go look and I'll say, okay, let me go look at their social media. Let me look at their website. If they have a YouTube, let me look at their YouTube. They obviously have a podcast, so let me go check that out on Apple or Spotify. What's the sound quality like? What's the video quality like? What do I think of the host based on listening? What does the social media tell me? Do they create high quality content? All of that stuff, I'm thinking about all of that before I go on that podcast. I don't think I've ever canceled a podcast because I can say this with certainty. I've never canceled a podcast because this was the first, second, third, fourth, fifth episode. I've never canceled a podcast because of that. I'm cool, awesome. Impact and mastery. Mastery is going to be the highest. Impact might be lower. Cool, I'm good to go. That's kind of my filter. Is this show aligned from a character perspective of the host? That matters way more to me than the size of the show. I buy into people. And then the show is kind of like a secondary thing. And I've been able to build a lot of deeply meaningful relationships based on that I wouldn't have. So that's my thought. And that's my thesis in this episode. Here's the best example I could probably use. If you're looking for a house right now, you're on Zillow or Realtor or whatever. Oh, what's the other one? True. I don't know. There's another one. And there's the filters. So it's got to be 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, got to be on an acre, blah, 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 right? The more filters you have, the less likely there is that you're going to find a house. This is kind of the opposite. So I guess the less filters you have, the more houses it's going to show you. Same for this. If the filter is, I want to add as much value as possible, essentially that's all the shows. All the shows will be available to you. I want to get better as a podcaster. All the shows are going to be available to you. If we then say, well, all right, let me turn this box on. Audience must be bigger than mine. Less shows. Okay, let me put this other box on. Opportunity to make money directly is there. Even less shows. So just like with a house, the more boxes you check, the less likely there is that there's going to be a large number. Kind of the same thought with this. Not saying that's wrong. If you're trying to get on more shows, I think it is probably valuable to open up and remove some of the filters. That's all I'm saying. Just because in the long run, you never really know what's going to happen. Who knows? I've had guests introduce me to other people. Like, cool, I didn't know that was going to happen. I've had, like I said, speaking opportunities, summits and online courses and all sorts of different stuff. I think I was in a book. Cool, I didn't know that was going to happen. That's more impact. So that's my thought. So mastery, impact, profitability. On a scale of 0 to 10, how important are each of those to you? And are you going on podcasts or messaging podcasts based on that importance? If not, it's a good opportunity, a good little 1% improvement. But there's no way I would have been able to have been on as many shows if I only cared about making money. There's no way. There's no way. It wouldn't work. Or if I said, well, this audience has to be bigger than mine. I'm missing out on so much opportunity if that's the case. Now, disclaimer. Is it like that forever? I don't know. In 10 years, when I have the opportunity, if and when, I believe I will, if we keep working really hard, when I have the opportunity to be on a really big show versus a smaller show that's just as aligned, I don't know, right? But for most of us, that's not the issue yet. The issue is not we have so much demand that we have to pick the highest quality. It's not like that for most of us, especially when you're trying to get on other shows. With guests, yeah, you're probably getting inundated with messages, so it's different, right? That's different. Maybe we can do an episode on that at some point. But getting on other shows as a guest is harder to do than getting guests on, just in terms of demand, supply and demand. So that's just that's all my point is with that. Will that change for you? I don't know. It might, but I would run that train until your calendar's full. I mean, yeah, if you're trying to book 5 podcasts a week as a guest, the best way to start is have all of those filters unchecked. But in this case, I guess they are checked. You know what I mean. But yeah, go in for impact. Go in for mastery. If profitability comes of it, awesome. Now, I know many of you are new and maybe you don't have products or services or coaching or courses or whatever yet. So maybe you're not thinking about money at all. Cool. Love that for you. I love that for you. Maybe that's something that comes down the line. Maybe for you, you're just thinking, well, this is good practice. I'm all in for that. I think that's a really good long-term time perspective to have. So that is my thought. Sit down on a scale of 0 to 10. How important are each of those for you? And is there anything we could do to open up the floodgates a little more to get on more podcasts? Because I am convinced it's one of the quickest ways to level up as a podcaster. Think about it this way. If you do 1 episode a week as a host, or if you're doing solos, whatever, and you're thinking, wow, it'd be really cool to do 5 episodes a week. There's no way I could ever edit that. There's no way I could ever come up with the topics. Go do 4 other podcasts a week. Boom, problem solved. Yeah, it's not your audience. Yeah, you're not going to see the stats. But mastery, impact, those two are covered right there. And it's mastery in a different way. It's different. This is far different than being on a podcast. I like being on a podcast probably better because I think it's a little bit easier for me because I tend to respond pretty well to questions. Now, I feel good doing this because I've done it enough, but it's different. Apples and oranges. Okay, cool. If you need help with getting on shows, maybe it's the messaging, maybe it's figuring out what kind of show you should be pitching, reach out. I have a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session I offer to you as a listener of this show. Not a sales call. I'm not going to sell you anything. I literally will start the call off by saying, based on where you are today and where you aspire to get to, what do you think is the most valuable use of our time together? And if you say, well, I listened to episode number 141 and you're talking about getting on more shows, can you look at my message on Podmatch? Can you look at my message on Matchmaker? Is there anything you'd shift? Is there anything you'd do with your profile? Can you help me there? Cool. Awesome. Love that. Share screen. Boom. We're off to the races. I'll give you some homework and you'll be good. Outside of that, we have another round of group coaching starting, I believe, on April 15th. So it's all for podcasters now. So the first 2 sessions are level up yourself. So we'll talk about consistency and habits and self-belief and self-worth. Second 2 sessions are level up your podcast. So we do a deep dive into what I talk about on here, just a deeper dive. And then the last 2 sessions are level up your business. So if you're somebody who wants to monetize the show and turn it into a business eventually, we talk about how to do that, the fundamentals, what to expect, all of that stuff. So we'll have the link in the show notes for that. Please, team, if you can throw that in, I would appreciate it very much. It's just nextleveluniverse.com, and you'll see there is a group coaching tab. All right, cool. I hope that you're getting on a bunch of podcasts, and I hope that you're getting aligned guests, and I hope you're feeling more confident in front of the mic or in front of the social media posts you're doing or on stage. If you're speaking, that is what I hope for you this week. As always, keep on crushing it, keep on podcasting, and I will talk to you all next week.